Good day. This presentation has been titled Socio-Spatial Complexities in Globalizing Commercial Street, Bangalore, India. Myself, Tanya Grace Joshua, formerly a research associate at College of Engineering, Trivandrum, and presently a guest faculty in the Department of Architecture of the same institute under APJ Abdul Kalam Technological University, Kerala, India. Now, the area of research is primarily focused on understanding the changing scenarios of growth in commercial streets that are influenced by the process of globalization. It is often observed that various interdependencies are created by this networking, and so places get influenced by this process. The study is therefore trying to understand the conflicting elements that are brought into the scenario, particularly the local scenario due to this process, and which further leads to socio-spatial complexities. The research question that is put forth is, can globalizing commercial streets in the Indian context hold socio-spatial complexities that could lead to placelessness? The structure of this presentation has been sectioned into three parts, and the first part attempts to understand the existing literature interlink between globalization and networking of cities. It also briefly addresses the relationship of the above understanding with the concept of placelessness. Now, the second section of the presentation brings about an analysis of an Indian regional case so as to understand the socio-spatial complexities that are involved here. Commercial Street, Bangalore has been chosen for this purpose. The last part of the presentation finally theorizes the findings and observations before conclusion of the presentation. So, moving on to the first part of the methodology, it tries to understand the existing theoretical framework. Now, in order to understand the transformations or socio-spatial complexities of any place, we need to first understand what is a space and what makes it a place. In fact, Manuel Castells had put forth this idea that a space is only the material support of time-sharing social practices. So, then a place only comes into effect when this space can be identified with the contextual, geographical and local relationships that relate to this place. But in today's scenario, when places are rapidly networking with one another, there is also an integration of cultures, creating a new manifestation of local experience. But when this idea is related with the ideas put forth by David Harvey, we realize that this new manifestation could lead to further difficulty in the identity of places due to spatial homogenization. In fact, it leads to a loss of identity to a place, a condition called placelessness. So more about this condition was understood from the studies of Edward Ralph, which showed that this is a point in transformation where individual identities of the places are lost. Now, on knowing what is placelessness, the question remains, can socio-spatial complexities due to globalization lead to this condition? So, now as the area of concern has already been discussed, we move ahead to the Indian regional case of Commercial Street, Bangalore. Briefly introducing Bangalore, it's a major city in the southern state of Karnataka in India. And you can see from the maps here about the fast growing trend of the city. In fact, it shows the extensive urbanization that's happening here. Now, looking at these maps here in the next slide, we can notice an extended growth towards the southeast corner of the city in the 2011-12 map when compared to the 2005-6 map above. Now, this growth is greatly linked to the growth of the IT sector in the city, which in fact link the city to the entire world and to the process of globalization. The graph here also shows the trend of population growth, and if you notice, it can be seen that it is since the 1980s that the graph began to grow steeply upward. This was in fact the time when the first MNCs started off in the city. Now, to understand a particular case in detail, that is Commercial Street, which is the name of the street itself, it had been a major commercial area both during the pre-independence period and later. The photograph below shows the original character of the street. It was mainly comprised of a shop house character. But over time, this street underwent various transformations. But it was after globalization that we can observe the major global local conflicts coming into this place. This map here shows the entire commercial zone near the street, and the area bounded by the red dotted rectangle is the commercial street itself. This next slide has been put to briefly introduce you to Commercial Street, which is marked in red in the map. It is only a 450-meter commercial stretch with one-way traffic. This is a 6-meter wide road space and a 1-meter wide footpath, which was supposed to be there on either side, but in reality, it is actually a discontinuous path and often taken up for other purposes. On-street parking is permitted here, and there are commercial buildings on both sides of the street. 93% of these commercial buildings are greater than a single story. Now, talking about the streets adjacent to Commercial Street, they have a contrasting character compared to Commercial Street itself and are mostly local in character and sell local goods. This is a basic section of the street showing the type of commerce and number of shops in a single building. The red colored ones hold a character similar to the photograph below, bounded by the red rectangle. Similarly, the yellow and blue rectangles too correspond to the colors in the section. The colored bar below the section indicates the type of commerce, and as you can see, textiles remain the major commercial item here. Now, the analysis that followed a study of the street tried to identify the socio-spatial complexities that could be observed on site and the underlying cause for the same. The first observation was on the extent of commercialization in the street. The street being 100% commercialized today indicates that the extent of economic benefits offered by the street affected the nature of coexistent work-live relationship of the original street character. The pictures below show a partial section of the street today. Morphologically looking, there is a lack of architectural diversity here. Structures now look similar and compete for greater advertising spaces. Even the little character that existed previously is now overlaid with advertisements, and local stores struggle hard to match with these new morphological changes. Major brands have territorialized the area in an attempt to enhance their own visibilities, which is quite unlike the original culture of an Indian market where everything worked as a single entity. The sketches here show the similarity in structures and the extensive space taken for advertising on the facade. Similarly, another observation would be building envelopes that are created for a visual projection. It's more like a competitive massing where structures are trying to portray a larger massing so as to seem big and huge and seemingly global. But what is observed here is that when this happens, the local stores are absorbed as smaller elements within this larger envelope, or the smaller stores are demolished to create larger stores and thus a bigger commercial space. This identity crisis for the shops was indeed initiated by the globalization and localization that is extensively spreading into the stores here. But the major point that can be noted here is that it was the global and local stores that brought in the large built masses. But it was these large built masses in turn that pressured the smaller ones to look large too. So this is more of a cyclic to and fro process between morphology and economic prospects. Now, considering the relationship of the street with the pedestrian commuters here, we notice that these pedestrians lack a relationship with what's immediately next to them. This is mainly because of the large structures with huge advertisements that are not relatable to the human scale. In fact, the shops here now exercise a come and get your need style of commercial character rather than one where shopkeepers try to sell their goods to the people. This is very much in contrast to the nearby streets, and so now a changed commercial culture is visible on Commercial Street today, where commercial power and exhibition of this power plays a major role on the street. This has also led to people failing to identify themselves with places along the street. The territorialization by brands has further aggravated this issue because people can't relate to these places with their own activities. In fact, it was noticed that people quickly identified areas that held an eatery or any sort of activity generator or node as such. But what has to be especially noted here is that placing spatial references upon brands and large shops in fact diminishes the place itself into the background and alienates it from people's emotions. Moreover, it's also a very unstable way of relating to a place, because if brands change their location, then the identity of the place is also lost. Another noticeable aspect is the changes in the movement pattern. Since commercial street clearly echoes a global local style of commerce when compared to the other local streets in the area, we notice that even the movement pattern remains closely within the street, with a spillover that is highly limited to the immediate adjacent parallel streets. This is in fact denoting a socio-economic segregation between the streets. Further, we can also observe that even within the commercial street, the pedestrian paths are greatly taken up for commercial advertising, parking, and other activities that enhance the economic benefits. This, in fact, leads to a conflict where economic benefits are prioritized over people, and it leads to reduced public space in the street. Now, the question that we had placed in the beginning also sought to understand if the above discussed complexities of the place could lead to placelessness. In order to identify the same, we need to first put forth the various manifestations of placelessness as identified by Ralph. These are other directedness in places, uniformity or standardization of places, formlessness and lack of human scale and order in places, place destruction, impermanence and instability of places. In fact, looking at this table in the next slide here, we can notice that each of the above discussed observations could indeed fall into the various manifestations of placelessness. For example, we did observe that the character of the place is being standardized and that it is losing its human relationship. Similarly, the other aspects too can be compared with the manifestations of placelessness. So, now we can finally arrive at our conclusive findings, which are: firstly, there is a major wave of globalization initiated by the inserts of global brands into the street. Secondly, we have a growing global-local relationship developing on the street rather than a global-local relationship. And thirdly, economic changes have brought about extensive changes in morphology, activity, and social relations, but these character changes is in turn encouraging further economic growth, which can be therefore called to be a cyclic process of change and growth. But in this situation, it's gradually leading to a condition of placelessness due to intense, intricate global-local conflicts. And moreover, the pressure upon the street to upkeep the transnational image is in fact pushing the small local players to the background and encouraging character changes to the street, those changes that can upkeep the global image of the street. So, we can finally say that this new situation in globalizing commercial streets requires new design strategies, especially new strategies in placemaking, such as those that can integrate the global, local, and the local without compromising on the benefits of any of them. Therefore, new designs that can have co-joint spaces and can equally bring all levels of commerce to the forefront could help mitigate this issue of gradual dissolution of the local. So, now we can finally theorize and conclude that the socio-spatial complexities induced by globalization in globalizing commercial streets in the Indian regional context exhibits a cyclic relationship between economic conditions and socio-spatial relationships, finally leading to a condition of placelessness. The future scope of research in this topic lies in identifying placemaking approaches that can sensitively maintain global-local balance in a localized neighborhood. With that, we come to the end of our presentation. The next 2 slides includes all the references that have been instrumental in the detailed development of this paper. Thank you.